Hey everyone, my name is Wedge. Magic has been around a long time, sets have come and gone, and through most of them, drafting has been a core part of the Magic experience. If you've ever wondered which of the 85 plus Magic sets have the best limited environments, you've come to the right place. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 best draft formats of all time, best replayability and most viable archetypes, balanced colors, we analyze it all. Can you guess what'll be on here? I do hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, remember to hit that like button, helps out a lot. There's only a single honorable mention this time around, Unstable. The third Unset released late last year took Magic players by storm. Selling out all over the place, drafting Unstable became an experience like no other. I'll be doing an entire video on the set soon, but suffice it to say the only reason it isn't on the list is because it's so recent. I need more time to gain some perspective, but if I make another video like this in a few years, you can bet your sweet patootie Unstable will be on it. Getting to the list itself, we'll begin at number 10 with Urza's Block, Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy, and Urza's Destiny. Universally known as one of the most overpowered and straight up broken blocks in all of Magic, Urza's Block was actually a pretty great draft format. A bevy of archetypes were supported, from enchantments to sacrifice fodder to straight aggro to control and so much more. What added spice to this format was the inclusion of a boatload of color hate spells, including the Rune of Protection cycle that came with cycling, a mechanic first introduced in this block, and one that players loved using, especially in Limited. Spread across color, cycling was a feel-good mechanic, giving value to basically any card, and helping to make each color more consistent. Learning how strong cycling is and how strong hate cards can be made players who drafted Urza's Block better at drafting. Each draft was like a lesson. Now, the only reason Urza's Block isn't higher on this list is because Urza's Saga was a little annoying when it came to black. Pestilence was printed at common, and it was a nightmare for everyone involved. Luckily, Urza's Legacy and Destiny evened out the color's power, so it wasn't a huge deal, but still worth mentioning. All in all, a very diverse and dynamic draft experience. Urza's Block is good stuff. Number 9 on our list is Magic 2013. I'm sure this is not a set you expected to see on this list, but it deserves to be here. Yes, this is a core set, so the cards were relatively basic in design, which helped introduce new players to the game. But if you looked past that, you found a rich, diverse, and healthy draft format with fun cards and basically an infinite amount of viable archetypes. Now, core sets are designed to give some leeway and let people build what they want, but M13 did this better than any other core set in existence. The design wasn't too quick, so building around a mid-range strategy was easy, building control was easy, and building aggro was, you guessed it, pretty easy. The set had multicolor support cards that were easy to splash and suitably powerful when you did. Many of the creatures, while simple, performed multiple functions, and because of that, replayability was high. Look, here's what you need to know about Magic 2013. Simple? Yes, but you'd be hard-pressed to find another core set that balanced colors as well as this set did, and allowed players to build basically whatever they wanted and have it be viable as long as they had a plan. Coming in at number 8 is Invasion Block, Invasion, Planeshift, and Apocalypse. Considered to be the first truly amazing draft environment, IPA showed players what multicolored cards could really do. Each color dove deep into its part of the color pie to string together spells never seen before. Back then, you drafted Invasion first, then Planeshift, then Apocalypse. Invasion threw so many colors at you, you'd have no idea where to start. In this way, drafting Invasion felt different every single time. Balancing your colors correctly, dipping into other colors, creating hilarious synergies with cards and colors that would normally have no business being together at all. It was a work of chaotic beauty, and the way the block was designed, the draft got more and more insane as it went on. Invasion hits with absurdly powerful removal spells, creatures, and cantrips. Planeshift solidifies your color choices with more rewards than you could ever need, and then Apocalypse turns everything on its head. Look at some of these cards. Imagine the brutality. Now, the only reason IPA isn't higher on this list is because of the poor mana fixing in the block. Unfortunately, that's what it's infamous for. A multicolor focus block with little fixing. Sounds like one of Dante's Rings of Hell. And it was unfortunate, but the block was so much fun to draft despite that, it easily makes the list. If you ever get the chance to draft IPA, do it, it's a heck of a good time. Moving right along to number 7 on our list, Modern Masters. There have been solid supplemental draft sets since Modern Masters came out in 2013, but none of them compare to the wide open environment the set offered. Modern Masters is what happens when R&D wants to design a core set, but they don't have to think about new players at all. It's a beautiful thing. Supported archetypes in this set include Affinity, Storm, Dredge, splice onto Arcane, and Sunburst, in addition to the tribal power of Goblins, Fairies, Rogues, Rebels, and Giants, which mostly sucked, but they were still there. Now, the plethora of mechanics isn't enough to get Modern Masters on this list, but the synergy between the mechanics and the archetypes is absolutely enough. What makes Modern Masters so special is the versatility of the cards. There are, of course, the obvious synergies and strategies that you can chase after, but your entire deck doesn't need to be just one thing. You can pick and choose from the artifact synergy cards, and the ramp cards, and the token cards. What makes this set so special is that most of the cards in it are playable and malleable. While you may draft the same archetype multiple times, you will find new uses for cards maybe not designed with your deck in mind. Modern Masters is like the Play-Doh of the limited world. You can pretty much make whatever you want and it'll probably do something awesome and kind of stupid. Number 6 is OG Ravnica Block, Ravnica Guild Pact and Dissension. Guilds done so perfectly. With plenty of guild support for each color pair once all 3 sets were represented, RGD let you run wild, creating interesting and dynamic guild combinations in many different shards and wedges. As a matter of fact, one of the best things about this draft format was how the draft changed as you did it. You open your first pack looking for a guild to zero in on, but as soon as the second and third packs open up, you gotta go wider, improvise, make connections where there were none before. Combining guilds and mechanics together made the experience new and exciting every time. Dredge next to Bloodthirst, Convoke next to Graft. Even if you spent an entire pack building one guild and got nothing from that guild for the rest of the draft, you'd still be fine because it was so easy to pivot into a shard or wedge, joining forces between 2 guilds, sometimes 3. Which brings me to the last reason RGD was so phenomenal. 2 words: mana fixing. The fixing in this block was superb to say the least. Bounce lands, signets, shock lands. Best part was that the signets were common, so they were everywhere. As long as you paid attention, your mana was fine and you got to do real dumb stuff. Truly one of the best multicolor blocks of all time. Crashing into our top 5, these are going to be the cream of the crop. Players are very emotionally attached to these sets, so I expect a lot of yelling back and forth about the order in which I present these, but hey, I'm feeling pretty confident over here. Number 5 is Time Spiral, Planar Chaos. I made a conscious decision not to include Future Sight, and I'll explain that in a minute. Time Spiral and Planar Chaos both did things Magic sets don't generally do. Time Spiral went wide with archetypes. The set had no boundaries, seemingly no design rules at all, and time shifted cards that sometimes synergized with the actual set and sometimes just didn't. It was honestly ridiculous. You could draft Time Spiral 10 different times and end up with 10 different archetypes. Rebels, Slivers, Mystical Teachings Control, Green-White Beats, Green-Red Beats, Suspend, Blink Tempo, Thalids, Blue-Green Flyers, Red-Black Super Aggro. Again, Time Spiral, truly an unreal set that lets you do basically anything you could imagine. So with that said, what do you imagine would make for a better limited environment? How about adding an entire set that flips the color pie? Planar Chaos is just that, chaos. The set is famous for color-shifting cards, and you can just imagine what that does to a limited environment. We're talking blue removal, black prison cards, white disruption, green card draw, red tempo spells. It's very literally chaos. So to recap, Time Spiral presented us with one of the most diverse, fun, and wide-open draft sets of all time. Then Planar Chaos comes in and breaks every color rule Magic's ever had. When you put those 2 things together, every color fits with every other color. You can make any combination work. This is a world where you can draft a red-green tempo deck. Red-green tempo! And this is why it's number 5. There's never been a draft environment like this one since, and I doubt it will ever happen. Colors were balanced, powerful, unique, and versatile. I really can't talk this up enough. I know some of you are going to be upset I didn't include Future Sight in number 5. Time Spiral and Planar Chaos create an amazing draft experience with balanced colors and archetypes, and while Future Sight does bring a load of new keywords to the table, it also brings Sprout Swarm. You may think this is an overreaction, but I promise you it is not. Sprout Swarm is a mythic rare level limited card. This was the boogeyman of the entire format, almost always unbeatable. Remember Pack Rat from Return to Ravnica? Think that, but even more difficult to stop. If this were an uncommon, a rare, or a mythic rare, I would consider putting Future Sight in to complete the block, but because it's a common and all over the place, no thank you. It isn't worth jeopardizing the good times Time Spiral and Planar Chaos create on their own, sorry. Claiming our number 4 spot is Triple Rise of the Eldrazi. This set was unique in so many ways. It's arguable that the entire set was straight busted and limited, so everything you could do really well. And it came with a spread of archetypes rarely seen in Magic up to this point. There were spell-slinging decks that worked off of Surreal Memoir, leveling was a new and exciting mechanic, and the blue-white leveler deck was absolutely playable. But what really made the format so exciting was the ability to consistently play giant creatures and swing games at the drop of a hat. Ulamog's Crusher, Artisan of Kozilek, these were regular finishers, and somehow, someway, Wizards was able to balance this absurd draft format full of overpowered nonsense. If you've ever wanted to throw around crazy strong spells with solid synergy and a lot of interaction, Rise of the Eldrazi is for you. Walls, giant attackers, giant defenders, ramp, token, sacrifice decks. This set had it all, and all of it was huge and straight overpowered. Breaking into our top 3 is Triple Champions of Kamigawa. Now, before you get all crazy, Kamigawa was awful for Magic as a whole. That's true. If we're talking about Kamigawa Block's effect on the rest of Magic, I am not arguing with you. It was awful, but in a vacuum in its own little world, Triple Champions of Kamigawa was a near perfect limited format. Tons of crazy mechanics, lots of archetypes, many of them synergizing with each other. This was truly a set designed to be drafted, and then nothing else ever. What makes this format so impactful is the support each type of deck received. For the first time in a long time, not only were aggro decks supported, but control decks were well supported, and mid-range strategies and even mill decks had legitimate support. With Soul Shift and Splice onto Arcane synergizing with basically half of the entire set, fusing different strategies together was seamless. Spirit decks could easily include a mill sub-theme that would be viable. Control variants would dip into spirits for the arcane support triggers. The cherry on top of this masterpiece, color balance. Just as each archetype was supported, each color was as well, with powerful and versatile spells, allowing players to adapt during the draft, changing colors without too much of an issue. Kodama's Might, Teller of Tales, Glacial Ray, Dampen Thoughts. Just some of the cards that found themselves in most any Kamigawa archetype. If you put away the hatred for Kamigawa for just a second and give the format a try, you'll see what it was truly meant for, drafting. It's honestly beautiful. Number 2 is a set a lot of you expected would be number 1, Triple Innistrad. There are so many things about the set that makes the draft environment great, but there are a few key reasons it's number 2 on our list ahead of so many other amazing sets. First, the flavor, and I don't mean just the lore, or even the atmosphere. I mean, for the first time in a long time, Innistrad's flavor felt like it impacted the draft. Even super competitive players admitted that drafting Innistrad came with a flavorful theme. They weren't simply drafting, they were telling a story. They were building something, representing something. The cards were drenched in so much flavor, it was difficult to escape the excitement of it all. In addition to building the best deck you could, you wanted to be the Spirits player, the Werewolf player, the Zombie player. You identified with what you built. It's difficult to explain in words, but when you drafted Innistrad, it kind of felt like you were on Innistrad. Talking less about feelings and more about the cards themselves, Innistrad knocked it out of the park. The set's basics were easy to understand, so newer players could get through a draft relatively easily, but the complex interactions and synergies were so numerous that it presented a challenge to even the most veteran players. Innistrad's wide archetypal support allowed players to construct any number of tribal strategies, control decks, pure aggro decks, as well as actual real-life combo decks. Spider Spawning and Burning Vengeance became infamous as the format was explored more and more. Innistrad let players construct decks that did crazy, flavorful things, like playing a giant Splinter Fright, cursing your opponent to death, summoning a giant zombie army, becoming a ghost scientist. You get my point. The set combined deep gameplay with iconic lore and flavor. No other set had done this up to that point, and to this day, no set has mirrored that level of combined immersion and quality. Alright, number 1, it's all come down to this moment. I'm sure some of you are going to be surprised by this, but I 100% stand by it and will argue for it all day. Number 1 and the best draft format of all time is Triple Khans of Tarkir. A relatively recent set, there are a plethora of factors that allowed Khans to surpass so many other successful draft formats. First, This is the set Wizards finally learned how to perfect a multicolor draft environment. Ravnica was close, but Khans is a symphony. Focusing an entire set on wedges is incredibly difficult, but they managed to pull it off with flying colors. The fixing in Khans was optimal. There's no other way to say it. Gain lands at common, wedge tap lands and uncommon, fetch lands at rare, banners at common that came with card draw, as well as some fixing and ramp spells. If you needed to fix your mana in this limited format, you could. There were always options, and that's huge. In addition to the superb fixing, Morph was a genius include in the set. Talk about smoothing out your curve and your mana. Morph gave players flexibility they hadn't seen in years. The mechanic allowed for 5-color decks without risking too much, and the value as 2/2s wasn't lost in combat. It was a relevant power toughness, so these Morph creatures, even if they couldn't be morphed right away, weren't useless. In a format that widely supported 2, 3, 4, and 5-color decks, Morph is the main reason for that. The consistency and flexibility the mechanic gave to players is unmatched across all Magic sets. The final piece of the puzzle that makes Khans of Tarkir truly special? Balance. Color balance, rarity balance, power balance. The format boasts a near identical win percentage for each color based on Magic Online results. The format is relatively slow, and yet red still wins just as much as blue, just as much as white, just as much as green. With this eerily consistent color balance comes power balance within each color. Most rares are playable, most uncommons are playable, most commons are playable. There are very few cards that have no place whatsoever. Meaning that through each pack, you're drafting live cards. And since you can splash for just about anything you want, there's always room for movement, room for adaptation. This is why Khans of Tarkir has such absurd replayability, because you can do so much, and there are basically infinite archetypes. 2 drafts will never be the same. You can play any combination of colors that can do anything you want, in any way you want. This is flexibility incarnate. Khans of Tarkir is truly a masterful set, truly the best draft format to date. Now, before you get all crazy on me, there's only one reason Khans of Tarkir surpassed Innistrad on this list, and that's spider spawning. And I don't mean just the card itself, I mean what the card represents. When Innistrad first came out, it very well could have been the best limited format ever. But once it was explored and players caught on to how insane spider spawning was, attempting to force these archetypes became the norm and dampened the experience a little bit. Not enough to make the format bad, obviously, because the format is near perfect, even with priority on spider spawning. But it made it 99.9% perfect, which gave the even closer to perfect Khans of Tarkir room to pass it. Honestly, these two are interchangeable, but there's nothing as degenerative in Khans of Tarkir as spider spawning, so I gave it the edge. Hope that helps explain my choice a little better. I'm sure you have a lot to say, so I can't wait to read your thoughts. Be sure to let me know how you feel about my list, and if I left off something you think should have been on here, let me know. I'd love to hear what impacted you the most in your draft experience. Again, I do hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane, and this is a heck of a long video. If you made it this far, put a little smiley face in the comments so I know you're one of the cool kids. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. This video is brought to you in part by TCGplayer.com. We talked about a lot of draft formats today, and one of them was M13. This was truly one of the best draft formats of all time, and if you want to give it a shot with your group of friends, or maybe some new players you're trying to get into drafting or into Magic in general, you can still get unopened boxes of this set right now for $108 by clicking the link on the screen. Actually, I had no idea these were still around when I made the video, so happy accident. Great draft format, clicking the link helps the channel, everyone wins, no one loses, enjoy!